Hello. Today, I'll be showing you a tutorial of how to make a 3D platformer in Unity. First of all, before doing any of this, you have to make sure that you have already installed Unity in your computer. To do this, you have to go to your browser and then search Download Unity. And then from there, you click Download for Windows, and then it will automatically download it for you, and make sure to install after downloading. After that, the Unity Hub will open, and then you have to install one of the versions of a Unity editor. For mine, I'm using 2022.3.19f1. From there, click New Project, and then you will select 3D. Here, you can change your name and select the location in where you want to put your project. Mine is already created, so I will just open it by pressing here. So, as you can see, it is now already open. In Unity, as you can see, I have two models that are already present. One is the player, represented by the blue 3D capsule, and one is the floor, represented by a plane. As you can see, the model is moving and is walking or moving around on top of the floor. These are just some of the basic things that a 3D platformer has to implement in order for them to be able to make the game. So, first things first, how do you add a model? By right-clicking here and then pressing 3D object. Here you can see the different 3D models or objects that you can include in your game. In this instance, I chose to put a capsule. So by just clicking capsule, there. Capsule has just been put into the game. So you can see it's a different one compared to our player. You can also see here in the hierarchy which 3D objects are present, so you won't be confused. So, after 3D object of a capsule has been added, from here in the inspector, you can see the different things that the capsule has. Here, you can put add component. We're gonna put the rigid body component. So now, if we move the capsule onto the plane, above the plane, and if we hit play, you will see that the white capsule that we just put is on top of the plane, meaning because of the rigid body, it can interact with the plane and is staying on top of it. But still can't move, unlike our player capsule. But as you can see, because of the rigid body of the capsule, it can also interact with our player capsule. So, in order for us to be able to move this capsule, we have to first add a script. And for that, I already have a prepared script to be used in order for us to be able to not have a hard time. I will explain the code in a bit. As you can see, in the inspector now, there is the player movement script that has been added just now. So, to open and check what the scripts has, I have made a folder here that has the scripts. In order to make the folder, you have to right click, create, and then folder. And that way, your assets have a way to be organized. So now, let's click on scripts, and then this is the player movement script. So we double click, and now Visual Studio appears. As you can see, there's a lot of things here that have to explain in order for you to understand what they are. First, let's start here. Void start. Void start means that as soon as the game starts, this is called before the first frame update, meaning at the start of the game, this line of code is being called as soon as the game starts. How is it different from void update? It says here update is called once per frame, meaning that after the game starts, whenever the game is playing, all these lines of code are being implemented into the game and is being used. So, what does that mean? Let's go back. So, what it means is that at the start of the game, a line of code here will be implemented. And while the game is playing, this line of code will be implemented. That is why we're able to move. We're able to move the player and now the capsule as well. As you can see, it's not as the same as our player capsule, but we can see it moving already. Now, to explain the code of the following. First, we made the rigid body into a variable. More on that later. And we added a variable for player speed and jump force into 5f, which is a float. More on the serialized field later. So now, in the void start, meaning at the start of the game, the rigid body variable will be made into the get component rigid body. So now, as you can see, in the void update, the rigid body velocity, there is an horizontal input, which means getting the input of the horizontal movement of the player times the player speed. Here, the one that we put to float, meaning how fast the player will be. And then we will get the rigid body velocity of y. And then we'll get the vertical input of the rigid body times the player speed. Vertical input meaning the vertical movement of the player. So what does this mean? This means that through this code, the player will be able to move horizontally and vertically by using the proper key inputs, which we will check later. With that, in the rigid body velocity, it will get how fast the horizontal and vertical speed will be for the player. Now, for this line of code, next is the jump. In order just to do that, we will write the code if input get button down, meaning if you press the button, the jump action will be done. So we will now code rigid body.velocity similar to here, but instead of putting the horizontal and vertical input, as you've noticed earlier, we have a jump force variable which will be used for the placement of the rigid body velocity y. The y-axis is the one where the player moves up and down, as opposed to the x-axis being moved left and right, and the velocity z being able to move front and back. So this code means that if the player, or the user in this case, presses the correct button to jump, the action being done is that the player capsule will use the jump force of 5F to be able to elevate itself in the y-axis. So let's check this out. As you can see, the player is moving forward, backward, left, right, and now for jumps, we are pressing the jump button, in this case the spacebar, and we can see that the player is moving along the y-axis and jumping.